Okay, hello, welcome to another Zoom group. We're going to start with a bit of meditation. Now, if you're watching this on video, you can join in. If you're not really up for doing the meditation, if you skip forward in the video about 15, 20 minutes, we can sort of pick up after that. And the focus of the meditation is really to expand your perception of the communication that's occurring. So if you're in the Zoom group here with me now, or if you're watching this afterwards, chances are you're going to be sitting in a room somewhere, possibly on your own, looking at some sort of device, some sort of technological device, you know, a phone, a tablet, a laptop, something like that. So that's your kind of eyes open reality. There's what's in front of you. There's my voice coming out of the speaker on the whatever device you've got, and the little square image of me talking. So to start the meditation, I always do this when I'm meditating, is I don't like to get into a meditative position. Now, depending on the different school of meditation you come through, they will sort of tell you, oh, you know, sit up straight and get your spine straight and take some deep breaths and uncross your arms and uncross your legs and all that kind of stuff. I don't do any of that. But it's not just me being rebellious. That I don't do it because I want to. It's not like I want to catch myself by surprise, because that sounds like something kind of judgmental about that. It's not that, but I do want to. It's almost like I want to freeze frame how I am in my body, or maybe put it another way, I want to become more conscious of how I am when I'm not meditating, when I'm just going about my day. Like, so I'm sitting here, okay, and I haven't really thought about it. As soon as I close my eyes, I'm like, oh, I'm really holding my guts. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I'm really holding in my guts. Okay, so I have to let those go. Then I go, oh, I'm not actually sitting up that straight. I don't feel that comfortable, and so on. Now, when I do the daily meditations on Instagram and Facebook and all that, I talk about sort of scanning your body. And if you're new to meditation, that's a good thing to do. Just sort of slowly scan your body from your head down to your feet and back up again. But if you've been meditating for a while, you can almost, as soon as I close my eyes now at this stage, whatever bit that's tight or uncomfortable will get my attention. It will go, hey, you're like my guts. As soon as I close my eyes there, it's like my guts were gone. Oh, you're holding them in, right? Now, I don't think that's a very uncommon thing because of all sorts of societal, things about being slim and lovely, and that doesn't just apply to women. I mean, men get that as well. You know, this feeling of holding, and I know I've had that like my whole life. And certainly my spine, I'm very familiar with my spine, that, you know, if I don't think about it, I'll end up kind of slouching quite easily. Now, you maybe will have a different thing. So I'll just kind of, if you haven't closed your eyes yet, I would close your eyes now. I'll just sort of draw your attention to a couple of areas that are common places that people hold tension, or that are hard to get a sense of sensation there. So let's start off with your eyes. Eyes, you know, you spend all day looking out through your eyes, and there's a lot of muscles involved in eyesight. There's the muscles that work your lens. The lens of your eye is like a very soft, like a lozenge or a candy. You know, it's like a soft candy or a soft button shape. And then around it, there's a ring of muscles, and the ring of muscles are like the springs around a trampoline. And but then they tighten and relax, and that's what helps you focus. One of the things that help you focus. So you've got that going on. Then you've got your iris in front of that, which is like the blinds or the curtains on your windows. You know, if it's too bright, you close the curtains a little bit, and if it's too dark, you'll open the curtains. That's what your iris is doing. So that's all going on. Now, they are very hard to feel, those muscles. It's hard to get your consciousness into those muscles. But if you just bring your attention to your eyes, you can begin to get that sense of those muscles. What's easier to feel are those muscles on the inside of your eye. They're called your intrinsic eye muscles. The ones that are easier to feel are the extrinsic eye muscles. So you've got 6 of those, one on either side for left and right, one above and below for up and down, and then 2 kind of lateral ones that help you when you turn your head to the side. Your eyeballs rotate in your eye sockets. And if you don't know that, next time you're looking in the mirror, move your head from side to side and watch your irises. It's quite freaky if you've never seen it before, but you can actually see your eyeballs rotating in your head. Anyway, so you got those muscles as well. So there's can be a lot of tension in your eyeballs. So just as you have your eyes closed there, one of the ways that you can become a little bit more conscious of the muscles around your eyes is to gently turn your head from side to side as if you were looking, you know, over your one shoulder and another shoulder. You don't have to turn your head completely, but and if you focus on your eyes, you can feel your eyeballs moving in your head. That's still looking, even though you have your eyes closed. And just moving your head gently like that, it's just a nice way of starting to, it sort of helps you to get a sense of the sensation in your eyeballs, to move them just very slightly, very gently, side to side. You can go up and down, but I find side to side is better. A bit of rotation. And that just helps you bring your attention to your eyeballs and helps them, it can help you let go of the tension in your eyeballs. Another area that people can hold a lot of tension is just the mouth and throat area, particularly the talking bit. It's similar to our eyeballs. Our eyeballs are very engaged in the outside world when we have our eyes open, and in a way of receiving and scanning, and but also our voice box, throat area is very involved in communication. We don't even think about talking now, but when we were a baby, when we were learning to talk, it was a big deal. Now it's just, you don't even think about it, but there can be quite a bit of tension there as well. So that's another nice place to just put your attention on and help it to ease or let go of any tension. It's like visiting a friend, and you take any bit of tension that they have off them. Heart area is another nice area to focus on. It can be hard to get a sense of sensation. Like if you very quickly put your attention in your hands, there's a lot of sensation in your hands. It's very easy to feel sensation in your hands. You compare that, say, with the back of your shoulder blades. It requires a bit more. You have to sit with that for a bit longer to start to feel the back of your shoulder blades, or say the back of your thighs or something like that. Some parts are more easy to feel sensation in than others. But if you put your attention in your heart again, even though it can be hard to get a sense of your heart in terms of sensation, like you would with your hand, what I find activates that area for me is if I just start to think about expansion. Your heart sits inside a bag called your pericardium, and often tension in that area can be in the pericardium. So if you put your attention on it, you can get a sense of possibly a wrinkled bag expanding and giving your heart a bit more space to do its thing. As you focus on your heart, It's good to let go of the idea of the, images you may have seen of what hearts look like, or diagrams or feelings. And your heart has got quite a lot of energetic components to it as well. And in many ways, you can expand the field of your heart in quite to make it much bigger than if you're very limited, stuck on it's this shape and it's got 4 ventricles, 4 chambers, and all this kind of stuff. You think of your heart more as a energy field generator. It's easier to relate to it on a more sensational, meaning to do it sensation kind of way. So another area that can be tight, as I mentioned before, is the abdomen. And the abdomen covers quite a bit of area. So from the underneath of your respiratory diaphragm, your diaphragm could be tight as well. And that can be part of holding, because your diaphragm is a big muscle, a big upside down hammock inside your abdominal cavity. So, you can run your attention along the perimeters of that structure. So along the top of your rib cage, right, to your back. Often the tension will be in the perimeter rather than the center. It can be in the center as well, because the diaphragm is perforated by a couple of things: your esophagus, your aorta. So it's a complex muscle. It's not just a sheet. It's kind of ribbons of muscle that are folded around each other as well. And then down into your abdomen as well. It's lots of muscles in your abdomen. And it can be a case of feeling like slowly unclenching a fist. You'll let go, and then there'll be more to let go, and then you'll find another bit to let go and another bit to let go. But the phrase, letting your belly flop, I've always found that as a very good, it just sort of communicates where I need to go with it, to let it open up, let it relax. It's good to check your pelvic floor as well. It can be a little bit like your heart. It can be one of those areas that you're not too conscious of. And with any structure in your body that you come across that's tense, and it won't let go of the tension with just breathing and just like letting it go with the out breath. Sometimes if you tense it up and then let it go, you kind of break the hold, and then it can start to relax. So same with the pelvic floor. If you sort of just tighten it and then let it go, it can flow better. And all the while we're doing this, if you just remember to keep breathing, nice, deep, lovely breaths. So if you bring your attention to your hands specifically, and just get a good reference for what the sensation in your hands feel like. And a good way to do that is to contrast the sensation with the back of your hand with the front of your hand. Because I know for me, the front of my hand, and by the front of my hand, I mean my palms and my fingertips. When I contrast that sensation with the back of my hands, it's quite different. The back of my hands feel much smaller in comparison to the front of my hands. And as you've been meditating for a while now, so you're sort of dropping back from your body. Your body sort of can start to feel like a jelly mold that you are withdrawing from, and then you can allow the sensation to be wherever it wants to be in the space inside. It doesn't have to be fixed on. My hands are there, my feet are down there, my head is up there. You can let that go. Just come back. And similarly with the sensation in your hands, instead of like, oh, my hands are this shape, the back is pretty much the same size as the front. As you let go of that idea and kind of, what's the sensation like? You get a more of a triangular feeling of like a big area on the front and a small area in the back. So as you're pulling back from your body, pulling back from this jelly mold into kind of inner space more, you can have a sense of that it's much bigger in here than it looks from the outside, that it's a little bit like the TARDIS in Doctor Who, or something like that you'd see in science fiction, where something looks one size from the outside and then they go inside and it's huge. I think they did it in Harry Potter, I think, with the tents as well. The tents, if they ever went camping, the tent was like this tiny little tent, and then they go inside and it'd be this huge palatial thing on the inside. Similarly with your body, the more you go back into inner space, the bigger you can allow it to be, or allow yourself to feel it to be. And then staying with that sensation in your hands, if you just reach your hands out on either side, as if you were trying to reach out and connect with somebody or touch somebody. And you can start off with thinking about me and having the intention that you'd like to connect with me. And what you may notice is a slight difference in the sensation in your hands. That there was the snapshot you took earlier on, the reference you took earlier on, oh, that's what made the sensation in my hands feels like. Now there's something slightly different. Okay. If you start off with me, it's the easiest. Now, if you're watching the video, you can do this too, okay? Because back in inner space, two things are different: time and space. They operate differently in inner space. So like I'm currently connecting with all the people in the Zoom group who are all around the world. And so space doesn't matter. We can still connect. Yeah, I can feel them quite clearly. I'm not saying take my word for it. I'm just saying for me, it's possible. And, you can as well. It's fine if you don't, but if your mind is getting into it and kind of like, oh, this is rubbish, you can make a little arrangement with your mind where you go, look, I'm going to have a good old think about all this afterwards, but for now, I'm just going to go with the sensation, and I'm not going to make it up or anything like that, but I'm just going to be open to feeling something slightly different. And what I was saying about your heart area, you can use your heart as a generator for this. Your heart, you can use that generation field in your heart. That will actually help you, because if you are, of good intent and good cheer, you can kind of just expand that to kind of reach out to other people behind the scenes and connect with them. So if you've got a bit of a sense of me, you can now include the other people in the Zoom group. You can include them as well. And the same, if your mind gets into it a bit, you can just make a deal to review the facts later on. But for now, just go with the sensation. And again, your mind doesn't have to get involved in where would they be? Would we be standing in a circle? How would you can just hold the intention of, I want to include those other people, And it's easiest to feel this with your hands initially if it's new to you, because we're used to touching new things with our hands. So it's quite easy to kind of, it's not a huge leap to kind of do it with the sensation in your hands. It's a familiar way of connecting with people. And as I was saying about the time thing, that time operates differently behind the scenes here where we are now. You can connect with all the people who are going to watch this video. And if you're watching the video now, you can connect with all the people who've watched it before you. Again, if your mind starts to get in on that, just make a little deal to have a think about it afterwards. But for now, just have a sense of expansion, and that there's more possibilities for communication that you may not have been conscious of before. So now we've included more of the communication that's going on. We had the in front of the scenes perspective on the communication, which is my voice, the little screen, the room. And then now you've included all this other communication behind the scenes, what's possible. Because when you hear about people who talking about profound insights they have to do with oneness, you know, that we are all one, that we are all connected, whether that's through, you know, some sort of drug induced thing, like some sort of ayahuasca thing or some LSD trip, or some other, you know, mind altering thing, like they went on a fast for 40 days, or they did something that just changed their perception. And they just had this beautiful insight of we're all connected. And I'll say things like, oh, I looked at the tree, or I looked at a bird, and the bird was me and I was the bird, and there was nothing, there's no difference between us. Or I looked into this person's eyes and it was me looking back. And the thing is that where they felt that connection was where you are now, behind the scenes. You know, it's not like they merged with the bird in the eyes open world, or that they merged with the old lady whose eyes they were looking into, or whoever, or they merged with the tree, their hand was stuck through the tree. That's not the way it happens. It happens in here, where you are now, behind the scenes. And the lovely thing about that is that as you settle into this more, and this is something you can do on your own, you can get a sense of connecting with other people, is that there's always some friendly energy to connect with. There's always some friendly people to connect with. You're never really alone, which is an important thing to realize for now, when, you know, a lot of people are in isolation and feeling lonely, that the frontal kind of communication and connection is just that, it's frontal, but there's also a behind the scenes connection as well that you can do. That's why, you know, the cliche of the sage who goes off and lives in a cave, that's how they can be sustained by that, because they're connected into other things, so they're possibly not lonely. Never having gone and lived in a cave myself, I can't speak from personal experience, but I'm guessing that that's what it is. So similarly to the way I don't like to just get into a nice meditative position before I start meditating, we're going to start coming out of this now. So there's two ways to kind of come out of meditation. One is, if you're pretty new to meditation, you can have feelings of travel, meaning you can feel like, oh, I've gone really deeply. I've gone very deeply into myself. If you feel like that, and that can manifest physically in your nervous system as well, you can feel like you're dropping down, particularly when you sit up. When you sit up, it's quite, can have quite a strong bodily sensation of dropping down. If you have that and you're very, you know, with that sensation, then it's good to come back from that before you open your eyes. It's good to not just pop your eyes open, because it can be quite disorienting. Now, if you've been meditating for a while, you can work towards holding the inner space and the outer space at the same time, so that you can open your eyes and you can still be very deeply, and I'm using inverted commas around deeply because you never actually go anywhere. That's just a feeling. You can hold that inner space, that very still inner space that you may have been in meditation, and your eyes can be open, and you can hold the two together. It hasn't changed. And you know, further along, the more experienced you get with doing that. And when you start to do that initially, you can open and close your eyes and use them like a valve, you know, like, because when you begin to do that, you'll open your eyes and immediately the inner space will be gone. It's almost like you're being sucked out of your eyeballs into the outside world. And if that happens, you just close your eyes again, reconnect with the inner space. It's always there. It's easy to connect with. You can go, oh yeah, there it is again. Great. Open your eyes again. Oh, great. Oh no, I lost it again. Close your eyes again. You know, and use your eyes like a valve to equalize the inside and outside. And then as you go further along, you can have your eyes open, be in that very still place on the inside. Be having a conversation with your neighbor or the postman, or, you know, you're screaming 2-year-old child or whatever, and you can still hold the two together. Because if you think of it in terms of depth, that when you meditate, it's like you go down into the depths yourself, and then through repeated meditation, you bring the depths up. So it kind of spills out into your life. So then meditation becomes not so much somewhere you go to as a refuge. Oh, I have to meditate, I'm so stressed. It becomes just another part of your day where you check. It's almost like you're checking in, or you're just, it's more concentrated version of what you're like all the time. Okay, so welcome again if you've skipped forward to this part of the video. As I say at the beginning of all these, the talking parts of this, the Zoom group, and I say it because it's important that the time of the guru is over, that the time of the spiritual teacher is over, that the time of the person up on the pedestal who knows the truth, that's over. Now we're all the guru, if you like. And, you know, I'm not alone in saying that. Like, I think it's Thich Nhat Hanh said, you know, the next Buddha is the community. Or another way I like to think of it is the way Ram Dass said it, which is that we're all walking each other home. Not I'm walking you home because I know the way. You're walking me home and I'm walking you home. And that person's walking that other person home. We're all walking each other home. That's the current state of consciousness, as I see it, is that you know, any idea of that somebody else knows the truth is not helpful for you. That we're all just, you know, we've all got something for each other. So I'm facilitating the group for sure, and I've had lots of experience, and I've got my perspective, and that's all I'm sharing, my perspective. I don't think there is an ultimate truth, and that I'm conveying it. I'm just conveying mine, and hopefully something will be communicated, and we'll both be helped by it. So with that in mind, with these groups, I like to talk about the sort of things that the people in the group are interested in or that's going on for them. So that can be, I've got a question, or it can be, hey, this fantastic thing happened to me, or I've leaped forward in my emergence, my further emergence, or just this is going on. Any of those, you know, it's very welcome. I'd much rather talk about that than the sort of things I've got in mind. So, does anybody want to ask a question or share something or something along those lines? A couple of things have occurred to me during the week. It's more like these kind of things are what I am sensing is going on. And one of them is what I'm kind of, I think of as a call to bigness. I think there's a call to bigness at the moment, particularly for people like you who are, if you're watching this or if you're in the Zoom group, I'm talking to you. Because if you're interested in consciousness and you're interested in behind the scenes, and at the moment, it feels like consciousness is accelerating. There is an acceleration going on. It's been going on for a while. It's been going on for years. And then it sort of burst onto the surface with the beginning of the pandemic. Well, it kind of started with Trump, but particularly the pandemic of this, you know, I'm very familiar with this kind of, you know, external strangeness that's going on. The only thing that's different about it for me is that it's just happening on such a big scale. So there's a lot of people who are going through this. But if you are here and you're listening to this, then definitely this applies to you as well. And it's a like there's a phrase, I can't remember it exactly now, probably going to misquote the hell out of this, but something along the lines of, you know, that ignorant people who are like got a lot of unconsciousness speak a lot. You know, they're in the press. they're kind of hogging the microphone, and people who are quite conscious don't say much. And that's fine, but it's like that time is over. It feels like, not that you have to sort of go and do something. I don't mean that, but it's like the whole movement at the moment of consciousness and in the world and just everything is encouraging people like me and you to step into their bigness, to be bigger than is comfortable, and to like one of the things that stops people who are conscious from saying anything is they're very aware of all the gray areas. So they're like, if you are very invested in black and whites, yeah, it's easy to get up on the soapbox and start telling everyone about how black everything is or how white everything is, because you're into certainty and definites. Whereas, life in my experience is not like that. It's gray. There's so many shades of gray. So it's, the more you get into that, the more you kind of go, well, yeah, they might be right. From a certain perspective, that kind of looks right. So there's a tendency to kind of withhold, or not withhold, but to like not, give your perspective on things. And it feels like that's being not challenged, but it's being changed now. There's a change now. It's like now the world needs your perspective in conversations with other people. It's like you're being called on in some way or another to add your voice to the conversation, to say, hey, everything's gray. I hear what you're saying about how everything's black, and I hear what you're saying about everything's white. But in my experience, it's gray. It feels like that there's a call for that now, to live your bigness. Just it sounds like a kid's show. Live your bigness, but that's the way it's kind of coming to me anyway. Those are the words that I'm getting in my head about it. About to be, not to be bigger and force yourself out of your comfort zone or anything like that. I think that's a crazy idea, and such a prevalent idea. My God, living outside your comfort zone. I mean, all you have to do is follow that logic, and it doesn't, it adds up to a miserable life. Because it's like, if you if you like, oh no, you have to live in your, you have to always be pushing your comfort zone, right? That means that you always have to, be outside what's outside your comfort zone is uncomfortable, okay? And if you always have to live outside your comfort zone, it means you're always going to be uncomfortable. Like, if I'd sort of put on my God hat for a minute, I think like, well, what would God think? Made all these little creatures. Like, yeah, I want them to be really uncomfortable. No, I mean, if you've had any children, you don't want them to be uncomfortable. I wouldn't anyway. So that idea of like out of your comfort zone, it's sort of missing the thing of growth. It's a very different thing to having courage. Having courage it just seems to be necessary. But that's different from like, oh, if I'm comfortable, there must be something wrong here, So I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about, oh no, I have to go and give a public talk about consciousness or anything like that. I'm just saying that, and you know what I'm talking about, day to day in your little interactions, there'll be moments that come up where you could say something, or you could hold your being in a certain kind of way, and you don't, because it's like, no, that's the way it's been in the past. It feels like that's changing, and that it's like everyone who's interested in consciousness is being encouraged now to be there in a way that they weren't. And the word that I get in my head is about living your bigness. Now, anybody got any questions about that or reflections on that?
Just a reflection, John. Yes, yes, I've been living that. Yeah, definitely that. Yeah,
You've been feeling it, have you?
Yeah, definitely been feeling it and living it. Like, it's time to speak from my perspective and share that. as well.
Yeah, that's great,
and,
Kathy.
and it's not, and in the past it would be fearful to do that, but it doesn't feel fearful at all to do that now. It just feels natural. It's like I'm just sharing my love.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's lovely. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Excuse me, somebody else saying, yes, it's very hard. It's a bit like going against the grain and people think I'm crazy. Yeah. Yeah, you can kind of, a bit like what I was saying with with your mind and meditation, you can kind of, I mean, unless somebody says to you, you're crazy, which, yeah, people can say, you can kind of go, well, unless they're saying that to me, I'm not going to assume that they think I'm crazy, But if they do, you can kind of use that as feedback of like, well, I mean, as I said before, communication is really difficult. So having the expectation that, something's going to leave you and arrive at the other person perfectly intact and exactly the way it left you, as I said it before, I say ABC and then I think ABC has arrived at the other person. And if I ask them to say back to me what I just said, they'd say, well, you just said XYZ. You go, what? No, I didn't, That's my experience of communication. And the pitfall of it is that because it leaves me so beautifully, the ABC, oh, lovely, that I just think, oh, well, it's definitely, of course, it's going to arrive. It's not the post, it's not like I put it in the envelope and it's going to arrive, because when they get the envelope at the other end, it's completely different. So if you don't have an expectation that your communication is going to arrive in exactly the way you left it, then you're much more flexible to kind of, when they say back to you, what are you talking about? You just said X, Y, and Z. You're not like, what are they, then you're like, okay, well, let me try a different way. I'll say it a different way and see if that is, And also, it's not, the point is you're not communicating so that you will be heard. That's not what's being asked of you. You're being asked to communicate. And again, similarly, if you're not attached to it, like, well, what's the point? If I wouldn't be bothered communicating unless I know it's definitely going to arrive and change that person's life, and they can now see the world from my perspective. No, that's not what's being asked. It's to do with vibrating. And I don't want to get all hippy dippy about it, but it's like when you, and that's what I said about holding your presence. So it's not necessarily about verbally, but on the inside, there's something else being asked of us at the moment. Or it's almost not, and I don't mean some, God's asking us or anything like that, but there's a space now that wasn't there before. And it's almost like a vacuum that's encouraging us to fill that space with our presence. And that can be communication, like what comes out of my mouth, but it can also be just presence, But if I do feel moved to actually make words, then if I'm not attached to the words, hitting the target and changing the person's life, and now that they suddenly go, oh, now I see it, it's all gray, then you'll be that'll be the most efficient way that you communicate it. Sometimes it's just the way you look at people. It doesn't have to be what you say. Okay. Anybody got anything else on that before I move on? Okay. Something else that's kind of been on my mind was, if you look on the internet, on YouTube, or, again, if you're interested in consciousness and in further emergence and that kind of thing, and the way the algorithms all work, it'll be popping up in your feed. It'll be going, hey, maybe you should watch this video of this person, this guru, and this spiritual teacher, and this person. And what about, and Alan Watts? Gee, he just pops up all the time, so it could be bombarding. It can be quite overwhelming, and it can be quite hard to know, like, well, who's, this person says this thing, this other person says this other thing, and this other person says this other thing. So how do you know, like, who's telling the truth, or how do you navigate that? That's something that's been on my mind. And as I said, like I've had personal experience of being with Barry Long, who was my spiritual teacher, and just going in hook, line, and sinker with him, 100%, and how that is not a good idea, and it didn't go well for me. So a couple of things that are helpful is this idea that I realized was that somebody else saying, yeah, it's Alan Watts is always popping up now. It's this thing of percentages, that depending on how conscious the person is, they'll have a certain percentage that's pure brilliant, fantastic, brilliant like a light, but they'll still have their own unconsciousness that they're working through. And if you bear that in mind, then it will sort of tune your ears to when you hear their unconsciousness coming out, So sometimes people are 50% brilliant and 50% unconscious, or sometimes they're 90% brilliant and 10% unconscious. And when somebody is, say, 90% beautiful and brilliant, that can make it very hard to hear the 10%. And it's often the 10% that can, cause trouble. So again, that's why meditation is helpful, because it sort of helps you tune your body and your system for discord. Something will just hit you wrong, That's why, that phrase, the ring of truth, it's a nice phrase because it's like a bell, and it's like if the bell is rung well, it vibrates in your whole system. Somebody says something in your whole system, like it's like goes, it's just like, yeah. And then if somebody says something and it's got a little bit of 10% in there, it won't be the same. It'll be like slightly off, and it's not like, you can kind of, oh, well, I'm just going to find someone who doesn't have any unconsciousness. Some teacher. I haven't found anybody like that. We're all just humans doing our best, Some people are more conscious than others, for sure. But everybody's got a bit of something, Everyone's working through something. I think that's, for as long as you're alive, you're working through something. So the low, if you go with that thing of the ring of truth, that's good. So, but it means that you can, if you know that everyone's got a bit of something, then you can sort of listen to everybody. Have a listen to Alan Watts if he pops up, and you can go, oh, that's great. Bong, that's really good. Oh yeah, that's really good. And then it's like, oh, hang on, I don't know about that. There's something a bit, off there. Or somebody can be saying stuff and the content of what they're saying is lovely, but the way they're saying it is the unconscious bit. It's just like, it's making you feel, awful. Like Krishnamurti is a good example of that. Like Krishnamurti, I remember reading Krishnamurti. What was it? The Krishnamurti's Reader. Okay, he's like similar to when we were in school, we used to have the a reader, like an English book, the Reader it was called, like English. Yeah, it was very schooly kind of name for a book. And so he had the Krishnamurti Reader. He had two of them, the first one and the second one. The second one's fantastic. It totally blew me away. And because he was dead by the time I read it, I never actually heard him speaking. And if you look up Krishnamurti on YouTube, he just sounds so grumpy. He just sounds very grumpy, very judgmental, and very superior. I find him. That could be just me, but the content of what he says is actually pretty good, but the way he's saying it is just awful for me. So rather than like, oh, I'm never listening to him, he's rubbish, you kind of, if you can be fluid with it and go, yeah, well, I'll listen to everybody and I'll have to, figure it out for myself, where the percentages are, where this bit's good, this bit's not so good, because it's part of the current conscious thing that's going on at the moment, is that we're being encouraged very strongly to find out what's true for us. You know, years ago, you could have your guru up on the stage and he would just tell you, or she would just tell you, now here's the truth. And you go, yes, okay. Now it's like we've all come up. So the pedestal has descended into the crowd. We're all, which is like, you know, as an idea, it's like, oh, that's great. But the smaller part of me is like, oh, what? Now I have to figure it out. Now, oh, can you just tell me? Can you just tell me what the truth is? And oh, God, I have to do all this work now. I have to do all this discernment. But yeah, that's where we're at now. So have I said all the things? That's kind of what I do about how to navigate all the onslaught, because you can't just turn it off and go, oh, I don't want to hear it, because everybody is something great, you know. You don't want to turn off the brilliant percentage, you know. So if you're drawn to listen to something, somebody pops up, or, you know, you read something, you come across a book and you're reading it, you can't just throw it away, you know. If you don't like the bit of unconscious, if you know about that there's going to be a bit of unconscious in there, and your job is to kind of discern it, then you get the goodies as well. Okay, anyone got any questions on that or reflections?
Yeah, me again.
Yeah.
I find that, like, I, you know, started working with you a long time ago, and I find that it's like, it's not creepy, it's nice. I hear your voice in my head and it's like, oh, is that what John was talking about 20 years ago? I understand that now. And at the time, you know, it's like anything new, any new concept or any new ideas, you know, especially when it's so far from what you've been doing, it's like, oh, I don't understand what that is about. And it's not like I've pushed it away or disbelieved it, or, you know, that's garbage. It's like, oh, okay. and yeah, like it just pops in when it's meant to, I suppose. It's like, oh, I understand that now, you know.
Yeah. The thing is, though, I have found that if I'm listening to somebody and they're saying something and I don't get it, it has a different quality to when somebody is saying something and it's unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
I just receive it differently, you know. Like I can like I can remember Barry Long talking about so like certain things he used to say about women and sex and relationships and man and woman and love, you know, and some of it was great, and then he sort of would just drift into feeling weird, right? And just like but it was so confusing for me because I couldn't, is that me, or it doesn't feel, my gong isn't certainly not ringing by any stretch. And then there was other times when he'd be talking about consciousness and deep levels of consciousness. And I remember one time he was talking about, he went into this whole thing about 7 levels of, I still can't remember it, 7 levels of this, and he had a big complicated hierarchy, right? Now, I hadn't a clue what he was talking about, and I didn't relate to it at all, but it didn't have that, it didn't feel off. It just felt like he's describing in a lot of detail his reality, his experience, right? But he's not sort of, there's no twist of unconsciousness in that. It's just, I don't, you know, it's just like somebody telling me about the weather in Bermuda, you know, and I'm in the Arctic. It was kind of like that. I was like, okay, well, it's nice to hear, but, you know. So for me anyway, you know, things that I like, I've talked about that book, the Tao of Being, that I've read many times. Like I might have read something and I'm going like, I don't know what that's about. And then 20 years later, I read it like, oh, that's what it's about. How did I never read that before? Which is similar to what you're kind of, I think,
Yeah.
anyway, what you're saying.
Yeah.
But if there's somebody saying something and it's slightly off, it's got a
Mm-hmm.
different quality to it.
Yep. 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 Understand. Yep.
Okay. Anyone else got anything about that? I want to finish with sort of a story. It's kind of a parable. It's actually a true story, but I was only thinking of it the other day and I was laughing about it to myself. But then I thought about it more and it's like, oh yeah, that's a really good example of this other thing. So anyway, I was living in the country, and I was with my the house I was staying in. It was an old couple, was staying in this old couple's house. Okay, and they had a big kitchen, and it was a big kitchen table, and I'd been staying there for a while, and some friends came down to visit. Okay, and we'd gone out the night before. Two youngish men, right? And I was a youngish man as well, and we'd all done a lot of drinking. Those two guys particularly, right? And they'd never met each other before. They were friends from different parts of the world. They were both friends of mine. So one of them was from Canada, one of them was from Dublin. And they were sleeping on the couch, in the living room. And the lady in the house had this habit of, when she got up in the morning and was sort of having a cup of tea and making breakfast, she liked to make breakfast for her house guests. She liked to put on whale sound, right? Now, where she put the whale sound on, it was this cassette tape of whale sound, was up pretty high. It was a highish shelf, and the tape was always in there. So she pretty much, as part of the preparation for getting ready in the morning, she'd be, filling the kettle with the water, and she'd reach up and turn on this cassette tape with the whale sound, okay? And it was a long, it was like an hour long, this thing. And there were periods of silence, in it. And then the whale sound would come back. It's actually quite lovely, to have there in the breakfast. And, and because I knew what she was doing and that she did this every morning, it was part of the morning kind of ritual. So, the lady had come down and was doing her breakfast preparations, including putting the whale sound on. And after about half an hour, the two lads surfaced, and they were seriously hungover, right? They were really hungover because they'd drunk way more than me. And because they were it's a holiday, and it's like, hey, we're going into town. Yay. So they were, in holiday mode. But then the next morning they were in suffering mode. Okay. And I was already sitting at the kitchen table, and they came in. I was like, oh, hi, and they sat down facing each other on either side of this kitchen table. Okay. And they're practically got their hands in their head, they're like really suffering. And so as they're sort of sitting there feeling very sorry for themselves, they're like, this noise comes on, right? This whale sound, okay? Now, the lady doesn't bat an eyelid. I don't bat an eyelid because I know, right? But the two lads are like, you could see, they're like, they immediately like rose up. They're looking at each other, and I could tell that what they were thinking was, am I actually hearing that? And they haven't said anything. They're like, and the lady is just going around, and I'm just enjoying this so much. I'm not saying anything either, right? So I'm not saying anything about this noise that's going on in the background. And the two of them are slowly having a big meltdown because they're like, they can tell like, oh, I think you're hearing this too, but nobody else. These other two, they don't seem to. they don't seem to be hearing it at all. And I let it go on for about 5 minutes, and then I put them out of their misery. It's like, yes, that is whale sound that you're hearing. And it's just like, if I'd seen that in a film, like, it would have been such a funny thing, right? I mean, it was hilarious to experience it when it was happening. But you know, it's like one of those memories that's just, I love to revisit it because it was such a funny incident. But it's a really good example of reality, I think, and the way reality is, you know, because for the lady of the house, she was in one reality, getting the breakfast ready, you know. I put my whale sound on, I make the tea, I've got some guests, I'm going to make them some breakfast. You know, that was her reality. My reality was, oh, there's the lady of the house. She's making the breakfast. She puts the whale sound on. It's no big deal. But then also my reality was, oh, these two guys don't know. They don't know that that's coming. That sound is coming from the cassette player. And then their reality was so different. It was such a different, like for them, they were practically having a psychedelic experience. They were like, oh my God. I feel so hungover. You know, they're almost not completely in their body, or they certainly don't want to be in their body. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible. I'm having such an awful time. And then into this, you know, and it's like, oh, but the lady's making us a cup of coffee. It'll be as soon as I get some greasy food in here, it's all gonna feel a lot better. And then in top of that, it's like, because the whale sound comes so slowly, you know, it's like, what is, oh, is that what is that noise? Am I anybody else hearing this noise? She doesn't look like she's hearing it. He doesn't look like he's hearing it. He looks as bad as I feel. And he looks disturbed as well. Are we connected in some way? Oh, what's happening? Nobody's, what's that noise? You know, that's their reality. And I just thought it was like that's the way it is for, you know, people. And I think, you know, we all think we're having the same experience, but we're not, you know, we're having such a different experience. And knowing that, it just makes it much easier to be compassionate. I wasn't particularly compassionate to them. I let them suffer for 5 minutes, but mainly because it was so enjoyable, so delightfully, you know, funny. But I thought it was a really good example of how, because the funny thing was the lady was completely oblivious to what was happening. She was just making breakfast. She didn't realize these two guys were having a meltdown because it was part of her scenery, you know, the whale sound. She probably wasn't even hearing it anymore. She was just thinking about the stuff she was thinking about, you know. And these two guys were having just this, you know, weird experience. So yeah, I thought it was a great example of how we're all in our own little bubbles, and it's kind of what I was saying about communication. You know, we don't always communicate. We don't always, you know, to think, oh well, of course I'm saying what I'm saying. Why wouldn't you hear it properly? And that's why, because everyone's having such a different experience. You know. Okay, it's one of my favorite little memories. Anybody got any questions or reflections on that? Okay, people are saying, wonderful, I'll remember that. Got LOLs. It's a really good parable. That's hilarious. Yeah, great. Okay. So, yeah, I just remind you about the call to bigness. And yeah, thanks for coming along to Zoom group. And I'll see you next week for some more.